Disappearing without a trace is a scenario worthy of the best Sherlock Holmes, and in reality, disappearing or making someone disappear is much more complicated than you think. We usually leave clues or something wrong. However, today we are going to talk about the passing of Mr. Small, one of the richest men in Canada at that time. Born in 1863, Ambrose J. Small began his rise in the business world at an early age. It's 13 years old. He is hired as a diver at the luxurious Worden Hotel, Toronto. He will start, in addition to being a diver, to carry out some illegal jobs for his employers. In particular, he will keep accounts between the richest bettors in the city and the bookmakers at the same time. The young man will then find a second job and is employed as an opener in a theater. But quickly, he will go from opener to programming manager, and he does not hesitate to program very delicate pieces for the time, especially Bertha, the girl with the sewing machine. It should be noted that at that time, Mr. Small was considered one of the most brilliant businessmen in the theater. For these rooms, he has the biggest headliners. To give you an idea, it's like the little hall downstairs organizes concerts with Buba, Niska, SCH, the PNL, all that every week. On top of that, it's like you're one of the first to see it, because you have to know that Mr. Small, he is one of Canada's top talent scouts. He has a flair for finding out what Canadians like at that time, and in just a few years, he went from simple divers to a real businessman by buying almost all the small theaters in Canada. But one of his biggest dreams is to acquire the Toronto Grand Opera. Very quickly, he becomes rich and powerful, but unfortunately, his enemies will go hand in hand with his success at the age of 39. Small decides to marry Therese Coleman, wealthy heiress to the Coleman distilleries, with a small idea in mind. His idea was to use his wife's wealth so that he could finally acquire the Toronto Grand Opera. He will build an office there, but also a Grete room to receive women without anyone being aware of infidelities, on which his wife will be totally aware but will close her eyes for many, many years. By 1919, it was at the height of its glory and had more than 90 theaters and concert halls. But that's when cinema will appear. Having been in business for many, many years, he sees cinema as a harbinger of the decline of theater and concerts. He then made a radical decision in December 1919, selling all of his theaters and concert halls for the modest sum of $1.9 billion. You should know that in our time, that would represent about 15, 16, even $17 million. The next morning, he will receive a check for $1,000. His wife will then rush to the bank to collect it. In the same after 12 WAG, he goes to his secretary and announces to him that he has sold all his property, but that the new owners wish to keep it for the new company. John, his secretary, didn't think much of him. The story goes that Mr. Small usually introduced dubious clauses into his contracts to benefit him at the expense of his clients. But when the client discovered the scam and went after Mr. Small, he called his secretary in front of the client. To humiliate him and make him understand that it was the secretary who had made the mistake and not Mr. Small, therefore understands that his secretary did not have much respect for him and that he accepted the new position without really balking. Around 5:30 p.m., Mr. Small will make the decision to go home, but on the way, he will stop to buy the newspaper, except that the snowstorm that has hit Toronto since that morning delayed the delivery of the newspaper, which will make Mr. Small extremely angry. He will shout at them and insult the kiosk manager before leaving in the direction of his home. We don't know yet, but the director will be the last person to see Mr. Small alive. His wife and friends will leave some time before alerting the police to the disappearance of Mr. Small. He was known for organizing parties lasting several days, but also for the famous disappearances for his conquests. As soon as the police have been notified, a huge query will then begin. The police are looking for Mr. Small. In all its former theaters and concert halls, but also throughout the city of Toronto, his wife will then publish a wanted notice with a reward of $50,000 for anyone who could find him, which is really huge for the time. But after several months of searching and a thorough investigation by the police, they will not be able to get their hands on the body of Mr. Small. Worse, they will find no explanation for his disappearance. But then, what could have happened to him? There are many theories, but one of them. I wish it was his secretary who had stolen about $100,000 from Mr. Small's bank vault before his disappearance on December 2nd, 1919. But after being tracked down by police and repatriated to Toronto, it is impossible to link Mr. Small's disappearance to his secretary. The only thing he could have been accused of was stealing $100,000 from Mr. Small's safe. Our theory focuses on his wife and the time it took her to report her husband's disappearance. It was about a month before she called the police, but after many interrogations and after putting enormous pressure on him, she will say that it was only because she was ashamed of his cheating and that he thought he had left with another woman. The latest theory is that it was one of his enemies, but none of them were angry enough to kill him. But despite all the theories that exist and all the investigations that have been carried out, Mr. Small will not be declared dead until 1924, and the investigation will be open until 1960. On the other hand, it will be closed without having been able to locate the body or even say why Mr. Small disappeared, an unsolved case that will remain so forever. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't hesitate to tell me in the comments. You should know that there is a second part of this video, a little more paranormal and ghost access. If you want me to treat it, do not hesitate to tell me in the comments and to like this video like that. At least I will know that I have to do the second part. It was Who Coined Fire then.